Oh, he's on stage already. Good.
As we gather here to celebrate freedom and to recommit ourselves to the democratic cause, we face, as you have heard, a powerful authoritarian tide. The remarkable third wave of global democratization ran out of steam, as Annie said, 19 years ago. Since then, many countries have fallen under the spell of illiberal and even authoritarian populism. Anti-establishment parties have swept into power, promising to elevate the people over corrupt ruling elites and decrepit institutions, only to betray them more deeply through corruption and abuse of power. These include not just emerging market democracies like Venezuela and Turkey, but wealthier advanced democracies in Europe and even the United States, whose stability as liberal democracies we took for granted. In this global trend away from freedom, authoritarian populists have implemented a common playbook to polarize politics, punish independent media and civil society, undermine judicial independence, purge neutral watchdog institutions, politicize the civil service and the security apparatus, and weaponize the state to persecute critics and opponents. I'm sorry to say that's a lot of what's happening in the United States right now. Once this authoritarian project settles into power, truth decays, the rule of law crumbles, fear sets in, and submission becomes the norm. Authoritarian populists draw from one another and from powerful autocracies like Russia and China the narrative arguments, political techniques, resource flows, and technologies to accelerate their bids for hegemony. The longer these authoritarian parties are in power, the more they eviscerate democratic institutions. But they are not invincible or irreversible. Incipient authoritarianism has been turned back in countries as diverse as Brazil, Poland, Sri Lanka, and Senegal. The slide away from liberal democracy has been reversed recently in Botswana and Mauritius. An executive coup against democracy was defeated in South Korea. Young people in Bangladesh last year overthrew a dictator in a remarkable surge of protest. And the long-standing autocracies in Venezuela and Turkey are looking increasingly desperate and unpopular. These examples bear lessons we must learn and promote if we are to ignite, as surely we can, a new era of democratic progress. First, we must study what it takes to defeat autocrats at the ballot box. Typically, electoral battles are not a straight contest between democracy and autocracy. Voters weigh their circumstances of life as well. Fortunately, autocrats have other failings besides their corruption, lawlessness, and abuse of power. Sooner or later, they fail to deliver on their material promises. Successful democratic campaigns target the populist hypocrisy and address not just people's political rights, but their economic and social needs. To defeat autocrats, democratic forces must offer specific, credible plans to meet the core policy challenges of economic growth and distribution, education, healthcare, infrastructure, public safety, and national security. People everywhere also need a vision of what constitutes a good and just form of government. Democracies have dropped the ball in making the case for democracy as the best form of government. Decades ago, they fought dictatorships and then came to power. Democracies taught their young people the values, ideas, and history of democracy. But as they stabilized, the existence of a democratic culture came to be assumed, and countries forgot as we heard earlier, the terrible price they paid under dictatorship, the fear of falsehoods, powerlessness, and repression, the lack of accountability, justice, and human dignity. We can make the practical case for democracy. It performs better over time. But we cannot pin the argument on performance alone, which may fail at specific points in time. The case for democracy is that being able to speak truth to power, to hold it accountable, and to change those who exercise it is a core element of human dignity and a basic human right. The freedoms to speak, publish, pray, organize, and assemble are inalienable human rights, as are the rights to a fair and impartial trial. It is only democracy, never autocracy, that protects these rights and treats citizens with dignity by investing sovereignty in them and not some self-appointed minority. Liberty and democracy are intertwined, as my friend Leopoldo Lopez constantly emphasizes. We must make these points relentlessly, creatively, and convincingly, not just in the schools, at every level of instruction and deliberation, but through social media platforms where people live their information lives. Russia, China, Iran, and other autocracies wage extensive propaganda campaigns to trash liberal values. They portray democracy as lacking in dynamism, capacity, and masculine strength. These arguments are false, offensive, and degrading to the human spirit, but they will not fail of their own accord. They need to be defeated by better, more inspiring arguments about why people need freedom to thrive and why societies need democracy to have freedom. Today, there are 4 arenas of struggle for the future of freedom. We have to prevail in all of them. The core battle now is in the countries that have been sliding back from democracy to autocracy. In almost every instance where authoritarian projects have been defeated, it has been through elections. Illiberal populists crave the legitimacy that comes from victory in multi-party elections, but corruption and misrule erode their electoral support. So they need elections that are competitive enough to validate their claim to rule, but rigged enough to minimize their risk of defeat. The pathway to restoring democracy in these countries is to seize the electoral opportunity, flood the zone with election workers and observers, and wage an effective campaign so that people who have grown weary of authoritarian abuse can defeat it at the ballot box. To win, Democrats must forge a unified coalition across factional and ideological divides. They need a narrative about what has happened to justice and democracy and why restoring these will help to make the country great again. A campaign is not a legal brief. It must inspire and excite. It requires strong, compelling leadership. It must engage diverse sections of society, including people who once supported the authoritarian populists but are now disillusioned. Democrats must also express patriotism and show that illiberal populists wave a false flag. These lessons can help to restore democracy where it has been lost and to secure it in a second arena when it is under challenge from authoritarian populist parties right now. But there are 2 other arenas of struggle in which we must prevail. Globally, Democrats cannot let the world's most powerful authoritarian states capture and hollow out the global institutions to defend freedom. The UN Human Rights Council, the international and regional instruments of electoral observation and assistance, the rules that govern the flows of data and information. Neither can we shrink from the global battle to support democratic values and free flows of information, and to lend technical and financial support to peoples, parties, media, and movements around the world struggling for freedom. In the face of isolationist efforts to defund and withdraw from this cause, we must convince democratic publics that we can only secure our own freedom by supporting that of others. A more democratic world will be safer, less corrupt, more peaceful, and prosperous. All of that has been under existential challenge in Ukraine since Russia's brutal invasion in February of 2022. Resisting aggression is the fourth arena of struggle. There is no more urgent priority than to give the Ukrainian people the weapons, resources, and economic sanctions to defeat Russian aggression. Similarly, we must ensure that Taiwan's democracy does not suffer the same aggression from the People's Republic of China. Taiwan must have the weapons, the trade, and the international dignity it needs to survive. We must preserve the status quo across the strait by making clear that the US and other democracies stand behind the resolve of a free people to chart their own destiny in Taiwan. We meet here today just a short distance from the grotesque wall that stood for decades as the dividing line between freedom and tyranny. 36 years ago, almost to this day, the wall was torn down. Few imagined it would happen when it did, but it did because of democratic conviction and resolve. Now we are in a new Cold War with global authoritarianism. The history of Berlin should constantly remind us that freedom is fragile, but it can also be resilient. We must never lose faith in the rightness of our cause and the obligation we bear again to defend freedom in an hour of peril. Thank you.
Dr. Diamond? Dr. Diamond, can I ask you to join me back up on stage, please? Well, now I get to ask you some questions. So if you'll come hang out with me over here in the middle, and I'll give you this microphone.
Okay.
All right. So we've got 3 minutes for questions. So I'll take advantage of them here. So you talked about the need to protect Ukraine's fight against Russia. Europe has been in a bit of a bind because it is still quite dependent on the U.S. militarily. So is there anything that Europe can do or should do in the face of democratic backslide in the U.S. in light of this dependence?
I tell all my friends in Europe, in Japan, in Latin America, humor and flatter the man if you need to in order to get to the bottom line. We will get through this. I think last Tuesday was a harbinger of what's going to come in the United States. This administration is deeply unpopular. It isn't performing successfully. I think America is going to turn to a better path, but we have to get through this period. And, you know, I treasure the line from the civil rights struggle in the United States, keep the eyes on the prize. And part of that prize is preserving our alliances, NATO, and its commitments.
And you've advocated that donor governments tie the quality of governance to receiving aid, but USAID is pretty much dead, and Europe is also slashing foreign aid. So what leverage do Western democracies have?
Well, not a lot right now. We're going to have to make the case to our publics, as I said, that freedom is indivisible. And when it's retreating in the majority of countries in the world, it can't be secure in our own countries. We need to rethink foreign aid in order to make it more effective and to concentrate more on the quality of governance. You know, if we had done more and used more leverage to to really incentivize improvements in the quality of governance, I think we could have improved more lives in low-income countries in Africa and Asia and elsewhere than much of the direct efforts we made at economic assistance. So we're going to have to leverage aid much more creatively in the time to come. And if we can engage our publics in that battle and help them to understand it, we'll have a better chance of sustaining and expanding aid again.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
I'll find the way.